con estremo piacere che vorrei introdurre Bart van den Eyden e ringrazio infinitamente di aver accettato l'invito di essere qua con noi. Devo dire che è anche grazie alla mia conoscenza di Bart che forse questo convegno è accaduto. Perciò c'è anche un legame personale e professionale che condivido qua. Ringrazio la sua rispondente Teresa Noronha Feio.
Grazie Carlotta. Buongiorno. Allora, continuiamo con il secondo relatore di questa bellissima giornata, Bart. Bart ha iniziato lavorando... Bart è un drammaturg belga per il teatro e per la danza. Lui si è avvicinato lavorando per il VTI a Bruxelles, che è un centro di documentazione per le performing arts. Come dramaturg freelance, Bart ha lavorato entro altri artisti con Meg Stewart, con il regista Ivo Vanova, con il drammaturg Simon Stephens, se lo dico bene. È stato ulteriormente, fra il 2009 e il 2012, il direttore di un programma a PAS a Bruxelles, che è un programma postmaster di Advanced Performance and Scenography Studies. Dal 2015, è direttore di un programma di master di teatro all'Accademia di Maastricht di teatro in Olanda, nei Paesi Bassi, e oggi ci porta con un intervento che si intitola Dramaturgy, a rehearsal space for the director.
Thank you. Actually, I hate to be in this place, and I hate to speak about dramaturgy. I thank Alessandro for the image he gave me. I'm actually the actor in black with a veil in front of my face normally, so suddenly I'm here without a veil, so I'm as nervous as my friend. I have to be closer. Yeah. Okay. Why do I not like to be here? I don't consider myself as a theoretician. I'm a practitioner, and I wouldn't know what dramaturgy is. I know some dramaturgical practices, and I am here because of Carlotta and Erika, because I think they are doing wonderful things. They are doing major dramaturgy, and it seems to be very important in Italy. So I said I dislike to be here, but I'm very happy to be here, actually. First of all, I want to say also, I think it was very interesting for me also to hear Alessandro, and also on this thing, the difference between theater and dance dramaturgy. I have been thinking about it before coming here also, and actually in my talk, I don't want to make the difference between dance dramaturgy and theater dramaturgy. First of all, every production you work on, every director or choreographer you work with, it's a personal relationship, and it's an individual relationship made by this encounter, so it's always specific. In that sense, for me, if I see the people I worked with, the difference was for me not so much between theater and dance, as more the difference between very much concept-driven productions where there's a lot of work in the preparation before the rehearsals themselves start, and productions which are very much process-driven, where actually the preparation is not so much dramaturgical. I will talk more about that, but I will give two extreme examples of the two ways of working, but where the process is central, and actually the production is the result of this encounter of people in a process. And I think for me that's a much bigger difference, this difference between process and, yeah, I call it process and concept-driven production to be easy, to speak easy now. I think for me it's much bigger than the difference between working in dance or working in theater. I will only speak about production dramaturgy here. I have been a company dramaturg also, and that's why I also asked this question about the institutional dramaturg. Because through the talk of Alessandro, I was thinking also actually something I had forgotten a little bit, because I don't work within an institution anymore as a dramaturg. But it's very interesting also to think about the dramaturg, which position he takes towards institutions. So how does he relate to the institutional, and is he the one who works and thinks with institutions, or is he the one who's an outsider in the institution? I think that's an interesting question also. That was a question that came through the talk of Alessandro. But I'm not going to speak about that. I'm going to speak about minor dramaturgy. Yeah, first of all, I want to say also something about me becoming a dramaturg. I think it's interesting in this context also. It speaks about a little bit about these times in Flanders and Belgium that totally fascinate Carlotta, the 80s, 90s. Actually, when I was 17, and even to me this sounds bizarre now, when I was 17 I wanted to become a dramaturg. That says something about Belgium and Flanders at that moment, I think. First of all, I want to say also, and it's very important, education. We went within the school context, we went to theater a lot. Which was normal at that time, much less so now, I think. And we had the chance that actually, and this is context always, that our teacher was the brother-in-law of a programmer of one of the avant-garde theaters in Brussels. So we went to see the new work that was happening in the 80s, and we saw a lot of it. And why did I want to become a dramaturg? What is very important, in the 80s, around the middle of the 80s, you had a new wave and a big wave of creators in Brussels and in Flanders, in Belgium. People who came a little bit from everywhere. You had people like Jan Fabre, maybe you know, Teresa de Keersmaker, Jan Lauwers, there was this director, Ivo van Hoven, Guy Cassiers, like many people coming from everywhere, not only from theater and dance, but also from visual arts. And they invaded the stage and started to make work in the context of petrification, is that a word? Petrification, like a petrified theater culture which was totally dead, which was totally closed from the world, and which they had no connection with, so they started to make this new work in a country also where there's not so much tradition. I'm not going to go in the Belgium history, but theater and dance have been in the past cultural expressions of elite, and the elite in Belgium was not Dutch speaking, so there was not a big tradition of theater, which is also an advantage, because if there is no tradition or little tradition, there is no prison. The tradition cannot be a prison. So these people, they were looking everywhere at that moment at the things that were happening in other countries, and stealing like, I don't know what the expression is in English, but stealing a lot and taking in, absorbing and appropriating. From Germany, from the United States, the Wooster Group was very important, German directors were very important, the dance scene in the United States was very important. And what was important, and I mean, afterwards, Afterwards, you can connect everything, of course, and then everything seems logical. At that moment, it was not, and it took a long time to develop also. But there were a lot of amazing new professionals coming up. So there was like this chance factor that you had these big talents, but also that there were not only these new talents emerging, but also people who wanted to create new structures around it. So it was not only artists, but also people who thought of constructing new structures, constructing new venues to show the work. There was also critical thinkers around them. There was a magazine in the 80s, etc. Enfin, it still exists, etc., which was a kind of critical magazine which really tried to contextualize this movement. So it was not only makers, but it was a whole new landscape that was created. And also, like Guy has told me yesterday, because I forgot, actually also like some constitutional chances, like political chances, that suddenly there was a new minister, who, etc., etc. But what was important about this movement also was that they saw themselves and they spoke about themselves also very strongly in dramaturgical terms. Dramaturgy was a term that was used not only by the artists themselves, but also by the organizers, by this critical apparatus around it. They used the word dramaturgy a lot. It was a word that you could find in the discussions around theater in all these circles. And I think what the basic idea around this word dramaturgy was, and that links it to what Marianne van Kerkhoven is saying, it links it, the idea that performance, the arts, are not happening in a closed bulb, closed sphere, but are in relationship with in relation with the world. And I think that was also a way of I'm looking for my word, of opposing what was there before, the theater and the dance that was there, which was actually happening in this kind of closed sphere. They wanted to create a kind of new performance practice which was in the world, with the world. And the word dramaturgical played an essential role in this discourse and in this trying to identify oneself as a new movement. They were very different, all these people, but they were very united in this trying to find a place in this institutional landscape where there was no place for them, and in opposing what was there and which they thought was not interesting at all. So in that sense, this dramaturgy was very present, and there were a lot of dramaturgs working. And in that sense, it may seem maybe a little bit more logical that somebody thinks he wants to become a dramaturg when he's a very bad actor. I was a very bad actor, I tried. And he's also not an artist. So I thought, and I thought a dramaturg, maybe it's, I think my vision of a dramaturg at that moment was it's a researcher. It's a researcher for the artist, and he works with the artist, and he does the research, and that is something I could do, and something I would love to do. And that's a possible, I think still, it's a possible dramaturgical practice is doing research in the most broadest sense of the word. I'm going to check my paper because I was a little bit going everywhere. Yeah, what is very important for me also to say that I think there is always dramaturgy but Alessandra said so much also. I think there's always dramaturgy in artistic production in the sense that there's always a thinking of the relation with the world. And even if there's an absolute refusal to connect with the world or to relate to the world, this refusal is also a dramaturgical choice. So I think they're always a conscious or consciously or more unconsciously, formal or less formal, there is dramaturgy happening. All these discussions about what we are making in the world, which I think, well, I cannot imagine that they're not happening when our artists work, are dramaturgy for me. So you don't need a dramaturg to make a production. I'm not the one that is going to say that everybody has to work with a dramaturg. Not at all. But there are some conveniences in formalizing it into a function, and I will talk about it more. I will talk more about that. So dramaturgy, another way of speaking about dramaturgy is that dramaturgy is about referentiality of the work. I'm sorry, I jumped a little bit, so I have to check. Yeah. Okay. So the decision to become a dramaturg. Two good things happened in that context. First of all, there is no training. There was at that moment no theater science training, like a full-blown theater science training in Belgium. It didn't exist. You only could do a postmaster in theater science. So I first studied history, medieval history, and only did this postmaster after. I say that's a very good thing because I don't think I wouldn't know what a dramaturg's training should be unless it's a generalist training, because also that could be a definition of the practice of a dramaturg being a generalist. I will come back to that. So I couldn't specialize immediately. I had to do something before I could go into theater science. I could have gone abroad, but that at that moment was not so evident yet, this kind of internationalization of studies, or at least not for me. So I first studied medieval history and only did 1 year of theater science after, and I never regretted that I did a more general study before. And just to give also a little bit a context of the theater scene then, because everything was being born. For instance, this training of 1 year in Leuven, I followed it. Actually, the professors there, they were, excuse me, Alessandra, you're not, but they were horrible. They were like totally horrible. We had 3 fantastic assistants, young, new assistants who were full of fire, and they took us to the theater, and we were in a constant discussion, and we were in a kind of development of shared knowledge all the time, which was wonderful. But the professors, they were just horrid. Just to give an example, my dramaturgy course was basically the discussion between theoreticians from the 16th century until the 19th century if theater should be played or read. And I give this example just to give that was the context also in which this new movement was born. So that was my dramaturgy course. Should we read or play texts? And so that was a chance, this kind of general training, and a second good thing happened, that I had to go to the army, which I refused. So I was a conscience objector, it is called. So I did civil service, and I did it in the Flemish Theatre Institute, the Vlaams Theater Institute, VTI, which was also very important for me because this new movement to the outside world, they created a united front. They had to, but inside there were very many divisions. Also, there were you had very many different kind of groupuscules, little groups who were very much confronting each other. And for me it was very difficult to, and I had the feeling that when you jumped into one of these groups, then you were in that group and then never you would meet the other groups, and I didn't want that. I felt also it the difficult choice because I didn't know them very well. So going into the Flemish Theatre Institute, which was a kind of institution which tried to unite this sector also and try to have contact with everybody, was also a way of getting to know a whole landscape. And so that's another form of generalist knowledge, which I think is very important for a dramaturg. So I did my civil service there, and I kept on working there for 4 years, another 2 years. And that's also maybe important to say, I became a dramaturg because I called myself a dramaturg also. And I think that is also an important thing to do. Sometimes it's very important to formalize things and then they start to exist also. Fake it till you make it. And this formalization is important, and also the other way around. I think I'm going a little bit ahead also, but I think also if a choreographer or a director wants to work with a dramaturg, it's very important that he gives a mandate to the dramaturg, because it's a very vulnerable position also, this dramaturg. I will come back to that. But it's very important, the only one who can give the mandate is the director or the choreographer, and to create a kind of position that functions, you need this mandate of the director, but I will come back to that. So, but I called myself a dramaturg. I started shouting that I was a dramaturg, and somebody believed it. I started to work with this director, Ivo van Hove, a theater director, who was at that moment working in Eindhoven, somewhere in the north, in a horrible city in the north of the Netherlands. He's now big and famous, but then he was not big and famous. Big, I mean, figuratively big. He's not fat. Big. This was theater. And this is my example of this concept-driven production. So where the major stake of the work of the dramaturg is happening before the rehearsal start, and that's why I will talk a little bit more about it. It's theater, but there are dance productions which are built like that also. But it was a kind of you could say, so it was repertory theater for the big stage. A kind of new, trying to find new ways of approaching this big stage, to find new ways in relation with society now. Very much influenced by German theater, I think, at that moment, and also by some French theater. Patrice Chéreau was a big influence for him also. And basically the work of the dramaturg consisted there in analyzing the text. Placing this text in a historical context, it's written in a certain period, and there is the context of the personality of the artistic personality of the playwright. It's a specific artist who has written this text in a specific historical time, and the idea is that it's essential to understand this historical context of the character and of the time to understand the text. There is a parallel phase of appropriation of the director. This director, with a certain kind of artistic identity, wants to appropriate this text to make this text his own. The image I sometimes use for that this text is a kind of landscape, and that basically what the director tries to do together with the dramaturg is to make a map. And you can make many maps into a landscape. It can be a map about how many people that are living in certain places, about the heights, where the water is, where the roads is. I mean, you can make 1,000 maps. So the maps is the personal organization of this landscape by the director. in discussion with the dramaturg. And the central question would always be, with this director, why would we do this text today? What is the reason to do it today? And then between brackets, for me, this director. So that's also a way of doing dramaturgy, doing this research. And at that moment, sorry, I have to. At that moment, computers were rare and almost not existing, so research was something else also now. I mean, this research that I did then, I could do it in half a day. Then it was 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month going into libraries, finding stuff. That has changed a lot. But this director was somebody who was, I would say, Ivo is a kind of total control freak, which means that he wanted to know every word and everything about his text, and the whys and the hows and everything. And my explanation of this is that he was a control freak who knows that you cannot make art as a control freak, so that he needed this kind of security of this preparation to be free in the rehearsal space. But still, this concept that was created in this preparation, because it was really created in the preparation, was basically the basis of the production, and the outline, the skeleton, if you want, of the production is already there before the rehearsals process starts. There are some remarks to be made. First of all, which is very interesting, I think there was a parallel dramaturgy also with the scenographer. So there was the work with the dramaturg, but there was also the work with the sonographer. Still, he always works with the same sonographer, who is an amazing sonographer, I think, and maybe even a more amazing light designer. But there was like a parallel dramaturgy happening with this sonographer, which then was translated in a sonography, in a staging. And for instance, when I speak with students and we speak about dramaturgy and we speak about concept, I always prefer to use the word universe. What is the universe you are wanting to develop? What is the universe you want to create? And I think it's a better word for concept because it indicates that a concept has consequences for every element of a production. It has consequences for the way we relate to each other on stage, the way we relate to an audience, the way we relate to language, to words, to everything in the production. And I find universe is a much more, I want to say, no, I'm not going to, a much more, a better term. But so there was and so in that sense, this thinking of sonography was also very concretely a dramaturgical work happening at the same time. First and secondly, I mean, there is a kind of theoretical research, but the discussion with the director, being this dramaturg in this context, is not a theoretical discussion, but a discussion about theatrical, and I really like the Dutch word in this context, verbeelding, which means the creation of images. I mean, I think performance is images, and so this discussion was always a discussion not about theoretical subjects, but about how is this on a stage, what are the images that are going to be there. And I think also that, I believe that a dramaturg is not a theoretician. Well, a dramaturg, I think a dramaturg can be everything. But for me, I am not a theoretician. I am somebody who works, I think it's not my forte. I think my forte is to think with directors or choreographers in this imagining And one of the sources for that is theory. Yes. So what was important for me in this context as a dramaturg, that it was a kind of classical training into contextualization, which contextualization of the basic material you would work from. Also this idea of images, of imagining. And what was also very important, for me it was also a training in finding an immanent position. I mean with this, I think also from my point of view that the dramaturg always should have an immanent position in the sense that he is thinking within the world of the artist he's working with. That means so that your starting point is his universe and your meeting points as a dramaturg with his universe. So for me it's a kind of, you try to find the overlap where your universe, where the universe of the director or choreographer meets your universe, and it's mostly, almost never a total overlap, but the overlap has to be big enough to be able to work together. So I mean, I know I cannot work with every director or choreographer, and I'm sure a lot of choreographers and directors could not work with me. So it's this personal relationship again, and it's very important, I think, and this has maybe also to do with this discussion, curator, dramaturg. For me, the dramaturg is very much, it works in function always of the process, but also of the choreographer and the director. That's the position I take, which is very hard sometimes. But so you have to find a way into the logic, the structures. I'm a little bit afraid to use words for this after your talk also, but the structures, the thinking of the director, of the choreographer, and try to think within this context. So that's an immanent position. It's not, in that sense, it's not an outsider position for me. It's an immanent position, and for me that this immanent training. So in entering the world of these playwrights was an exercise in immanence, and then entering into the world of this director and trying to find what this map of this landscape could be. I think it was a strong exercise in immanence, and I think, yeah, immanence could be a quality of a dramaturg. And last but not least, it was also a training in craftsmanship. I think also a dramaturg could be also an assistant in the craftsmanship of the organization of a production. I think artists may be also very much, or maybe solely, about organization. The theatrical, the performative organization involves craftsmanship, and especially, I think, maybe often more in dance than in text theater, for instance, where the text is a kind of basic organizator, can be a basic organizator of what is happening on stage. But in dance, there's so much work in the organization of the material, which is basically creating the essence of the performance, I think. And there's a lot of craftsmanship involved also. How do people enter? How do people go out? What does it mean, a diagonal on stage? Yeah, all this light set. I think also there a dramaturg can be an assistant of the director, not only in this organization, but also what are the consequences of this organization always. What if every organizational form has consequences? What are the consequences? So the craftsmanship, and on the organization I come back. Yeah, I'm not going to tell my bio. First I thought of telling my biography, but luckily I decided not to do that. But I also worked 5 years for a theater company who worked for children, which I loved. And I made 2 productions myself there as a director. First to decide that socially it's not my position to be a director. I don't want to be in the center. I'm a decenter person. And secondly, also to realize again, which is something I knew, but it was very important to realize again how lonely a director or a choreographer is. You're surrounded by many, many people in the best of cases who help you, but at the end you're the one making the decisions. I mean, if we're not in a collective process, you're the one who is alone in front of these decisions. And that is very hard and very lonely. And in that sense, it's nice to have somebody to share at least a bit of this concern. And this title I gave to my text, which is a quote by Meg Stewart, I think it refers also to that, this rehearsal space for a director, which he talks about, is the place also where the director or the choreographer can be insecure and can speak about his doubts and can speak about his worries and his not knowing, where there is not always a place in the rehearsal process for this kind of insecurity, because sometimes, often, maybe dancers need the feeling that there is a kind of knowing and a kind of certainty about where this process is going, and the talks with the dramaturg can be a place of doubt. Also, yeah, I'm jumping again, but also it's also something that Max refers to, and I referred at a certain moment to as well, because I love this expression also. Stephanie Karp, who used to be a dramaturg, but now is a curator, I think. She spoke about the dramaturg once saying that he is or she is a king or a queen without a crown. And I really love that expression. A king without a crown, so no crown. And I really love that expression because because I think it's true on several levels. First of all, it is very nice to have somebody in the house, and that's an argument to give this dramaturgy, to give the function of a dramaturg to somebody. It's very nice to have somebody in the production who is defending the production, only the production. So he's not defending the light, he's not defending his solo or his performance, he's not defending the set, or he's not defending the specific task he's involved with. He has no task, he has no kingdom. He just, so there is no, sorry, he has no crown. That's the expression. He has no crown. So his main concern, and his concern is the process and the production in itself. And in that sense, everybody involved with a specific function is also always looking very much from this point of view, and correctly. And very good he's doing so, but it could be interesting to have somebody who has a non-specific position in the process, and as thus also can become a kind of archive of everything that is happening. And in the sense, in an ideal world also, I love the dramaturg to be somebody who is present with all the other discussions. So also in the discussions with the scenographer, with the costume designer, with all these other people, as a kind of living archive of everything that has happened also in a process. So that also can be a dramaturgical practice, to be a kind of living archive. And the director or choreographer is mostly also as well, but he is, of course, very much involved. So the fact that there is some distance to this archive can help in revisiting this archive and in the discussion about this archive and in the work towards production. So a dramaturg could also be an archive. Yes. So I did a lot of productions. I'm still working from time to time with this director, this very kind of classical, concept-driven dramaturgy, which is very much in the preparation, which is a problem if you want to get paid also, actually, but let's not go into that. Because it's very invisible. Yeah, because maybe, yeah, no, I want to say something more about this king without a kingdom. That's also the problem of, that's why I said also that it's very important, because if you're a king without a kingdom, think of King Lear, it's not a very nice place to be also. So it's very important, I want to stress again, that the choreographer or the director gives this mandate to the dramaturg, because he is a king without a king, king without a... it's a king, actually, it's a king without a kingdom. That was the expression, sorry. Or king without a crown. So it's very important that this position is sanctioned by the choreographer, because otherwise you're lost also. And that can also be the frustration of dramaturgs. And I know a lot of actually frustrated dramaturgs also. And I tend to be a little bit one at the moment as well, but that's another history. So, but it's also a fragile position, this being a dramaturg. In 2006, Meg Stewart asked me to work with her. I had done one small dance production before. So Meg asked me to work with her. And that was wonderful, that she asked me. I had seen most of her work, and I was a big admirer. She asked me to work with her on It's Not Funny. And there, for me, it was like a total other world. I came from this, as I described a little bit, this concept-driven dramaturgy, and suddenly I fell into a process where actually the only preparations, at least to my knowledge, were the creation of the team, which is very, very important for Meg, the creation of this team. I mean, I didn't realize at that moment. As I said, I fell into this process. I mean, coming from a totally different world. So for her, there's the creation of the team, which is very important, which is actually, I think, the essence of the preparation, to think which people she will put together and how, what it could bring in this combination of people. And she, in that concept, for instance, just to give an example, she thinks in this context also of a wild card. There's always like one person or two persons where she thinks, I don't know, it's a risk. I will bring them in as a wild card. So to give you a little bit an idea of how she thinks about this team, this creation of a team. There's a kind of team, but that is very vague always at the start. In this context, it was humor. It was a commission, actually. It was Salzburger Festspiele. And they commissioned, or they asked to work several people around the idea of humor. So there was humor, but it's very vague. There, in her preparation, and that's also very essential. I think it's a kind of necessary grounding of this very vague start. That the idea that there is a set. The development of the set always happens actually before the rehearsals start. So the discussions with the set designer are happening before the production. So there is already these discussions on a set which are important and which give a kind of direction. In this context, for instance, for her it was essential that this set was opening up towards the public, so that it was a confrontational set. It ended up to be a big stairs that led into the audience. And yeah, I don't know if you know her work, but the first proposal actually of the set designer was a set that later became the set of Blessed. which is like a rain, a cardboard set with a rain landscape over it, and it rains. And that was refused exactly because it was a closed world. So she said, I mean, I love this set, it's a wonderful set, and she ended up using it for another production. But it's a closed world, and I need an open universe. So there are already some choices, dramaturgical choices, also I think made in the decisions for this set. And the dramaturg is present in these discussions. And then there is so these are the preparations. Theme, a certain kind of theme, but in the written in a theme, like a group of the composition of a group of people, and then a thematics, a set, and very often also there is some rehearsal material that is that she feels is not developed enough, or it has more potentiality from a former process, so that she takes with her. And then you have a very long, I mean, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say it here, but she has the luxury of working very long. She can work for 4 months on a production. I'm a little bit embarrassed to say it here, with a whole team around it. And for me, this new way of working, coming from this very classical text dramaturgy, jumping into this new world, it was a kind of epiphany, because it felt like a total liberation. But it was also a very strange world, in the sense that the dramaturg is not the essential creator, initiator of content. Like in the work in the process I had before, I was the one coming with the material to be discussed. Here, the dramaturg was somebody who brought material and content, but so did the set designer, so did the costume designer, so did everybody involved. Was a kind of initiator, bringer of material. So it was not a kind of exclusive position of the dramaturg. And of course, you were supposed to know more about theory, etc., etc. So maybe the accent was a little bit more in bringing theoretical material into the process. But let's say that it was a kind of very horizontal position in who brought in material and initiated possible themes and possible thematics. It was also not, the production is also not the result of a group developing a clear-cut concept, but the production becomes a kind of witness of a process. And it's, I don't know if you understand, but I think you do, because you're dancers also, it's much more logical. But for me, it was really a kind of shock to see also that this production, that the logic of the result, the production, are also a clear witness of the process itself, and as such, there's a censorship is not happening, which could happen to make a better product, like for an outside world. This, I mean, I always make the difference in the work of Meg between the monsters and the diamonds. And it's not funny, it was definitely a monster, in the sense, like Blessed or Violet, for instance, they are diamonds in the sense these are productions where they're really polished to a kind of end result, and everything has a kind of absolute necessity and a kind of focus towards one point. You have these productions in Meg's work, and at the other side you have the monsters, I call them, because they go everywhere, and there's very little cutting in the material that has been created in the process. It has been organized, and there's a lot where you could discuss, if you are a rigid thinker, where you could discuss the necessity of these things being in there, and all the different approaches of the material and of the thematics are there. So I think they are also quite demanding for an audience, because you have to look in very different ways also to this material. And some things are too long, they're too much, etc., but they are witnessing the process. And I always find that a quite brave position of Meg. While my tendency, as the craftsman also in the beginning, was to wanting to cut a lot of this material because it's too long, because we don't need it, but we needed it because it talked about the process. Yes, so. And in that sense, because this production is so much the result of a process, Meg, which was also new for me, started to do with runs very early in the process. So you have a process of 4 months. Embarrassed to say it again, but 4 months. And after a month and let's say a month and a half, we don't have to exaggerate, but after a month and a half, the runs start. So there's like this first throw of all the material that is being gathered. They're horrible, these first runs. They're endless, they're long, they're boring, they're everything. But they're super essential because it is there that you can see what the production can become, what actually we are making. And also that you could call and at that moment, I mean, a lot of people are in the production, so it's good to have eyes look at that material. And that also could be a dramaturgical function, is to see potentiality, which I think is, well, apparently it's very difficult. Because this potentiality is also an immanent potentiality. It's not a potentiality that you put out from the inside, but from that you try to see from within the universe of the choreographer and the universe of the production and the universe of the process. So it's a kind of immanent potentiality. It's not and that's the danger, and that's what we all have the tendency to do, is to project from the outside what we want to see on it, and not what is being born. So that's also a potential dramaturg. That's also a dramaturgical practice, is to the one who focuses on what can be. And also related to that, a love, I think, for organization and structures and formats, and the playing with that, because basically there's all this material, and the work is in the organizing of this material, and to find structures, formats, structural elements to organize this material. And this kind of love for the playing, for the possibilities of seeing the structures, but also their reversal, I think. I mean, I think it's not about creation of structures, but playing with structures. I would like to stress the word play. That could also be a dramaturgical practice. And when you teach dramaturgy, people very often look very afraid to you because they think they're not being consequent when they're doing things. And I think dramaturgy is not about consequence, as art is not about consequence. I think consequence is boring. Because that would be, I mean, I'm not saying mathematics is boring, but that would be mathematics then, and that would be simple, and it's not simple, I think. So it's not about just putting a structure on thing, but try playing with structures. And for instance, what was also very shocking for me, it was that actually in this discussion, and I try to do that more and more actually, the discussions with Meg were not so much discussions about meaning. So we were not discussing what does this mean, what does this exact scene means, but more about in this organization, in this juxtaposition, in this putting things together, what creates the maximum opening towards reading. So it was actually about maximizing meanings instead of closing down readings. And that is a wonderful work to do, I think. So, like, and just to be very concrete about that, like, for instance, I also worked on Blessed, this production, and there are 3 very essential scenes, I think, in the productions. I don't have a clue how Meg reads these scenes. I mean, I have a kind of reading of these scenes, and I'm sure she has a reading of these scenes, but I wouldn't know how she reads them. We never discussed exactly what it means for her or what it means for her, but just how we could organize these scenes and how to maximize possible readings of this performance. And I think that's a lovely discussion to do. To not go into meaning, but to open up a meaning. Yes. It was really so. I want to say I never use this word, but I love to use the word also. For me, it was really an epiphany to work with Meg. This kind of, after this very structured work, this kind of process-driven work, but it was also very scary and also very difficult. I know there was also a week where when I said red, Meg would say blue, and when I would have said blue, she would have said red. And that I thought, if this goes on, then I think I have to leave. Also the fact that there was like no preparation. I was the person of the preparation also. I was trained like that. And I really had to say myself in the beginning of this process also, like, you have experience. You are an experienced person, so you can bring something in this process, because it was totally scary. But these are like, these are like 2 very different processes with different kind of dramaturgical practices in, and I've made them a little bit more extreme than they are also, of course. But for me, that's not the difference, because I have worked in dance productions also where the work of the dramaturg was very much in the preparation and not so much in the rehearsal space, and vice versa, where actually we just, with the text also, we went into the rehearsal space. So for me, this difference, but it's personal, for me the difference is not so much between a dance and theater. Yeah, another way of speaking about dramaturgical practices would come from my work as a teacher. I've been teaching dramaturgy actually all the time. I've been working as a dramaturg also, sometimes in small amounts and sometimes in bigger amounts. And in art schools, I always found it very essential to make people trust their intuition, which is maybe a rare thing, a bizarre thing to say for a dramaturg. But I think the whole, you could also say that dramaturgy is learning how to question your intuition, and in the sense that intuition, which is also, I think, very much related to context, but that would be another discussion. What is intuition? But intuition is very fragile. It's very fragile. It's very hard. I think already in our society to learn to trust your intuition. But I think an artist must also question his intuition. So it's a very fragile process. How can you, this very fragile intuition, ideas that are born through intuition, how can you question this? And how can you protect this, at the same time, this intuition, and at the same time put it, ask it questions? That also you could call a dramaturgical practice. In opposition, I also teach very rarely at universities to theater science students, and then it was called practical dramaturgy or something. And there, for me, it was essential because university trainings are very much, or in general, are very much pushing people to become objective, to take distance, to rationalize. And I think a dramaturgical practice is always a subjective practice. It's related to this, when I spoke about this meeting of overlapping fields. I think a dramaturg always has to take a position also. He is not a kind of objective, non-defined, non-specified, non-contextualized, non-positioned voice. No, he is positioned, he is contextualized, and he should assume so. And he should assume also his subjectivity. Yes, and that's very difficult. It was very difficult to understand for these university students, these theater science students. I was very happy that on a group like most, that I would convince, or that I would get 20% of the people to take a subjective stance towards the material. I considered it a success. Yeah, so dramaturgy is not about being consequent. I spoke about that. It's about playing with organization and the consequences of organization. And then, yes, I also want to say something about EPAS. You mentioned EPAS. EPAS, for me, was another epiphany. I was there for 4 years, and it's at the start, I think it's the, do you say, it sounds bad, brainchild? The child, but even that sounds bad. I mean, Elke van Kampenhout is the one who created EPAS in the first place, and I had the privilege to work with her for 4 years. It's a postgraduate for artistic research around performativity and sonography, but so sonography not as set design, but as performative thinking about space. And people could come in with a research project and work for a year on it. And I was one of the coordinators, so working closely with these students. And I think what I became, I mean, I think I was conscious of it before, but what it made me really, really conscious of the fact that in this kind of coaching or working with artists, that the artist is the specialist. So if a dramaturg is working with an artist also, he or she is the specialist, and you are, and I as a dramaturg, I'm a generalist in relation to this specialist. So he or she knows the work best, and in a way, and in EPAS there were a lot of specialists with very specific researchers, which were where I had very little knowledge, and every time I had, and I still have actually in this kind of coaching, the imposter, how would you call it? Syndrome. The imposter syndrome, that I would turn out a complete fake. But I think, and that's apparently also, I think it's also a dramaturgical, it could be also a dramaturgical, but I mentioned it already, but a dramaturgical practice, this outsider look that helps you think about organization and reversal of organization and playing with organization in the directions you research and in the directions of final organization so that it can communicate with the world. Also, that is a dramaturgical practice, but it's not. You don't need to be a specialist of the material for that. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what EPAS learned me. And then just it becomes a little bit a biography at the end. But I want to add 2 more things. I started EPAS also brought me back to studying myself, because it was a kind of roller coaster of knowledge production, also for me, like opening up so much. I was always riding on these projects of others, and I thought I need some me time to study myself again. And I started to study psychology, not because I was so much interested in psychology, or the classical psychology. Actually, that's also one of the reasons I left. I was very glad to leave theater for dance, because I have a lot of problems with how psychology is very often treated in theater. And I was very happy to work with dancers who were not having this annoying habit of seeing people as kind of psychological lines going from point A to point B, but were reacting on context. And that's why I started studying psychology, because I wanted to do social psychology. I stopped, by the way, I didn't finish it, but I'm very much interested in social psychology. And social psychology is about how much we are influenced by context, and not in the well, also in the nature-nurture discussion, but very much also in the here and now. Every moment, every decision we take, we have the tendency to believe that we are very autonomous, while every decision we make is much more than we think influenced by context. And I'm very fascinated by that. And I think also that you could relate to a dramaturgical practice, or a dramaturgical position that is one of decentralization, of taking, searching and being alert to alternatives, to the possible alternatives. And in that sense, but it's also a bit cliché, but okay, let's go into a cliché again. If you could say that in a process, a choreographer or a director is very often or can be the focusing, centralizing person, and he needs to be in a way also. And that in that sense also the practice of a dramaturg could be the opposite, as the decentralizer, as the one who always thinks of the alternatives and who says yes, but. And in that sense, no, I'm not going to tell that. Yeah. So this about social psychology. I also started. No, I finished actually. I finished. I did training in mediation, which is an alternative conflict resolution process, where conflicting parties are working with a third party who tries to organize the communication. I was very much interested in that because I'm interested in group processes. And you could also call, mediation is about conflicts, or conflicts that have gone sour, where people are not able to communicate anymore. But you can call the artistic process also basically a positive and a productive way of dealing with conflicts. The group, yeah, it's finished. This is the last. Dealing with that, working together as artists is a productive way of dealing with conflicts, and in that sense, it's a fragile process also. So, being a mediator is also dramaturgical practice. Okay, I'm finished.
Okay.
In relation to this social psychology, because I loved also your quote, the destruction of the subject that is supposed to know. I mean, I think that is very much related to this decentralized position also. I love that quote, I wrote it down.
Thank you. I will continue in English because for me it's a bit easier to communicate with Bart. Firstly, I really appreciate how you gave a historical point of view on the Flemish, how it appeared, the Flemish New Wave, which comes actually from a country with no tradition or with a dead scene, which I think it's important for us here in Italy also to think further, not just to... and then going on that, I will focus myself on your process-driven dramaturgy.
Yes, yes.
And I would like you maybe to... I'll make you a very important question for me as an artist, which is, how do you... could you articulate more about the function of dramaturgy within a research? And how does this communicate to the world? Or is it important? How does an artistic research, for example, what we do here in Ricerca Per, or I don't know how it was evolving in APAS, for example, how does this, what's the importance of an artistic research, and when is it the moment for this to open up to the world? Is it through a production? And then there's the other side of dramaturgy, a production dramaturgy, or are they together? Where do they cross?
Yeah. For me, I mean, as being one of the coordinators of APAS, where this artistic research was essential, was what we were doing. I always had a very pragmatic definition of artistic research. We agreed to disagree on what artistic research was there also, which sometimes was a bit problematic also, but anyway. But what, for me, I had a very pragmatic definition of artistic research. For me, it was creating an environment where you are not product-oriented. Because, I mean, the whole outside world, let's exaggerate a little bit, but the whole outside world is product-oriented. And there's nothing, I mean, in itself, I don't have a problem. I think an artist wants to produce, so I don't have a problem with that at all. But with this production, with this being product-oriented, comes also a lot of givens already, things that are given ahead. If you want to make a dance production, I mean, probably you have to perform for a certain number of people. You have to have a set that you can move, you have to, I mean, there are a dance performance is a formatted product, and so with this format comes a lot of obligations, things you have to do. So in that sense, the research you do when you're working on a production is already very functioning in a lot of within a lot of limitations. And for me, APAS was a place where you could do artistic research, so research, not knowing where you had to end, where it would end, to what the result of it would be, and in the sense that you could liberate yourself to a certain extent of this kind of how do you call it, givens, I don't know if that's English, but like ordained elements around the production, so that actually the process of thinking is freer. That is for me and it doesn't mean that you cannot produce when you're doing artistic research, but then the hierarchy of things are reversed. The process becomes much more important than the product, so these products are in function of the research, or in function of the process, and not the other way around, which is mostly the case. And you could also say that another way for me of defining artistic research is the connection between the products you make. So also that it's the in between. So and how does it relate to dramaturgy? I think one could be I say there's always dramaturgy. I think also in artistic research, even if it's process based and you're free from these product constraints, then still you're in a relationship. I mean, I come back to my definition. So there can be dramaturgy. There is dramaturgy in the sense that there is this relationship with the world. But since the logic of the if there is communication of the artistic research, which in a training program there should be, I think, then the communication of the research, the format it has comes out of the logic of the research itself, and that is that's a discussion you can have with the dramaturg. So I think there can be dramaturgy in artistic research, and there can be dramaturgy in production, but it's different in the sense that the aim of the research is very different.
Right, because from the other point of view, for example, with Meg Stewart, you write, I don't have it here, the text, that often she doesn't know where she's going to.
Yes,
also
her basic, she has a kind of basic attitude. Yeah, I mean, I think Meg in a way, but she has the luxury to do that also, and she has created this kind of situation where she can do that amazingly. I mean, like a basic position of Meg is that to say I don't know, like which was I think was making her life very difficult in the beginning. Also, when she was working as a choreographer, is to know very well what she didn't want, but to not know what she wanted. And if you're a dancer and he does something and you say, no, that's not what I want, and then he asks, yeah, but what do you want? And then you say, I don't know. It's horrible. It's horrible. And then you try again, and then she said, And especially in the beginning, I think it's very, very hard for her because there was no context. Nobody knew her work because she was starting. And now, of course, when dancers work with her, they know, very often they know her work, and they know, so there's a kind of contextualization of it, and a kind of trust. She has made productions. I mean, it ended somewhere, that it makes it possible to work, but it's a very, it's a very hard position to take, I think, and it's very difficult in the process very often because, I mean, even if you know the context, then it in the act itself is very frustrating. But it creates also, I think, but I'm a fan. I'm not objective, but it creates a kind of an extreme diversity of work, of results, but he's not objective neither. The director of the company, he says that basically the work is very difficult. Relatively young, but difficult to sell because programmers don't know what they get. I mean, if you see a production as Violet, which is, I think, between brackets, pure dance, and you see something as Built to Last, there are two totally different worlds, and at the same time not. So this not knowing where you end, which is basically, yeah, you could say an artistic research position, but at a certain moment it stops also, because it has to result in a production. Is a kind of basic artistic research position, you could say, yes.
Throughout her work.
Throughout that work.
Going within the work.
But she's super interested in organizing also, and because that's also, I think, a connection we had. It was this kind of love to play with organization. She loves that, and she's the daughter of a theater director also, of theater people. It's Not Funny was about that also, actually, kind of revisiting this Broadway context. So there's this kind of love and hate for this kind of organization also. I mean, it's if goods are damaged, but that's the name of our company, then they were whole. So there's a relation to structure in that title already. In that it's a program also, I think.
Yeah. Another thing that I was very touched by your talk is, obviously it's very personal, but it is what makes a dramaturg, and what kind of training or formation should it have, can it have, how can we open up maybe this experience that comes from starting what's the function or the institutional dramaturg. What could this be for future dramaturgs? How can we help them to become actually a dramaturg? But I will open the space to questions.
But I want to say one thing to that also, is that I think as a young choreographer also, you should choose somebody with whom you can talk about your work, and you should name him your dramaturg also. It can be your set designer, it can be, but you should. I mean, if you're interested in it, you don't have to do anything. But I think that is the one who is for you a very good discussion partner, and who is for you having a function in relation to your work. That can be your dramaturg, and it's good to formalize it in a way also. And I know, because it's a luxury also to have a dramaturgy. I know a dramaturg. I know. But I mean, you could think in win-win situations where choreographers play each other's dramaturg, etc., etc. So it's not, dramaturgs are not floating in the air. They're the people you meet with whom you have good conversations, fulfilling conversations about which help your work. These are your dramaturgs, and maybe you just should start calling them that.
Anche se siamo in ritardo nel programma della giornata, diamo spazio a 2 domande se ci sono.
Thank you so much, Bart, for such a rich presentation. I have a small curiosity about some words you used during your presentation. In particular, I'm referring to landscape map. When you equate a map, the text to the map, to a map, as evidently map is not the territory, but it's a representation of the territory, a subjective representation of the territory. If you agree with this statement, what is the territory you want to explore when you work as a dramaturg?
But if I understand well, that is actually a question. What I understand, what I think art is.
Well,
is it?
Yeah. But it's an unpleasant question if you want. But when you talk about creation of images, you are speaking about representation. So this representation has some links to the reality, but also some elements that keep a distance from the reality. So I'm very interested in explore this difficult nexus between landscape or territory and the
map as a representation.
And the text, yeah.
But I don't understand what you mean by text in this context, because I used it in relationship to text.
Yeah.
But in that, I mean, in the image I used, and maybe it's a wrong image, but in the image I used it as actually there the text was a territory.
A landscape. You said exactly.
A landscape. No, you're right. A landscape. It's a landscape.
This landscape and a map. A map and landscape.
No. The text.
I wrote down exactly.
No, but but maybe I said it, but then I made a mistake in the original image I made. Was that the text? But this is for text dramaturgy. Yeah? That the text is a landscape, and that actually the work, together with the director, was creating a map. So actually we create a kind of a possibility of going into that landscape. That's the idea behind it.
A guide to the travel.
A guide, yes. A map as a guide.
Thank you. It's clear. Thank you.
C'è ancora tempo per un'ultima domanda, se qualcuno vuole.
Yes, my name is Ariella Vidak, Just to ask you, just to make a synthesis about what you said, because this figure is a little bit, it's a new concept, I believe. It just the history you made and the fact that we have to define. There is no institution they recognize. Just to say what is the contribution to a piece, if there is a dramaturg or if not. The question also, I have two questions actually. You make a contribution to create the material, or it just read what is there? To be a little more clear, if you, what you said about the reading of what is happening in the first run through of the piece, talking about Meg Stewart, and I was struck about the word read. So you can have everything, like you can make in a space everything. Somebody can read it in one way and another can read it in another way, and that makes a very strong change about the result of the piece, because you can see a house in a way, and somebody else can see that house in another other way. So you contribute to make the house, or you contribute to read what the house means?
But I think if you read at that moment, and you, I mean, I will give a very concrete example of this first production. When we saw this first run, actually we saw characters, or the possibility of characters, and not so much as characters as where you can write a whole biography, but for instance, there was the man in the cupboard. And that was a kind of recurring phenomenon that this guy, this one performer, dancer, he came out of, in and out of the cupboard, and that became a kind of part of the personality of this man in the cupboard. So that were things we were seeing at that moment and discussing, and through reading them at that moment, we found them important, and so we worked further on that. So, but I think, I mean, yes, there are elements I bring in that are forms that stay in, but everybody does in the production. I think that's not only what a dramaturg does. As everybody, your set designer does the same, your technician does the same. Everybody does in a production. For instance, I know there was in a production, I don't know which one again, I saw a video of a happy dance, and I thought we need this happy dance, and I brought it with, and they copied it, and it's in the performance. So I am I brought this dance movement, this little score into the performance, but I think that is not different from anybody else in the process. Everybody does that in the process. I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but reading, of course, I mean, when you start to read in the process and decide that elements are important, then they become important in the process and in the organization of the organizing is, this is a really bad answer, but organizing is creating also, I think.
Yeah, but the choreographer wants to have a certain specific quality in the body, and ask or give structure or gives idea to the dancer.
But I'm totally not a choreographer. So like
in that sense that like he creates through a method a result.
Yes, and I will discuss. Like for instance, I worked a lot with Arco Renz also, who is very much is a German choreographer working in Belgium, who has worked a lot in Eastern countries and has a kind of choreographical material, which is very based on Oriental dance. I don't know anything about it, but I mean, there, for instance, the discussion was very much about what I saw and how I read it, and then there was a discussion about it, and he is the choreographer. I'm not. I'm totally not. So it was about consequences of bringing in elements, of bringing in dance material, and of organizing it. But I will. And sometimes, yeah, but I worked, for instance, with Lisbeth Cruet. There it was about cutting it up, slowing it down, etc. That was a kind of discussion we had, but it's a kind of discussion. Yeah, this is, I mean, for me it's related with this opening up of this material, of meaning. That, in that sense, I would give suggestions of working this, really the choreographical material, but it's always then in relation, but also sometimes, yeah, also to just presence also. I mean, because we were talking about representation also, but I mean presence, performance is also so much about presence.
Yeah, it's clear.
It's clear, yeah, because
yes,
I'm chaos, yeah.